Hello and welcome to On the Marie Curie Couch, the podcast that aims to break down taboos and start open, honest conversations about death and dying. I'm Jason Davidson. I'm a social worker by profession, and I've worked in palliative care, hospice care, and bereavement support services for more than a decade. Each episode, we'll be speaking to a well-known guest to find out about how they feel about their own mortality and how their personal experience of bereavement has shaped the way they live their life. Today, I'm on the Marie Curie couch with Arabella Weir MBE. Arabella is a comedy actor, writer, and charity activist. She wrote and starred in the iconic sketch comedy show, The Fast Show, which they recently toured to sold-out venues across the UK, and they're going to tour again in the winter of 2025. More recently, Arabella starred as Beth in the hit BBC sitcom Two Doors Down. She's also written several books, including the international 1997 bestseller Does My Bum Look Big in This? And in 2024, Arabella was appointed member of the Order of the British Empire in the New Year's Honours for services to the arts and to young people. Arabella Weir, welcome to the Marie Curie couch.
Thank you.
How are you?
A bit frazzled today, but I'm fine. Nothing a cup of tea won't sort out.
Can I start, Arabella, by asking if you could tell me about a significant bereavement that you've experienced in your life?
My dad, my mum, my stepmother, and my best friend all died of cancer. And probably my best friend was, well, difficult to say the worst, but she was the youngest. And of course, was one of my very closest friends. And what I'd learned from being with all of them, well, we didn't know my stepmother was going to die, so she more or less dropped dead, but I was very close to her. And what I've learned is it is a huge privilege, and I really, really hope it happens to me, to know when you're dying. And that's one of the reasons I agreed to do this, because people are so nervous talking about illness and death. And yet the kind of irony being that every single one of us knows it's an inevitability. And yet people are so funny about it, and no, you really shouldn't do that, and don't tell them, I don't want people to know I'm ill, and odd approaches given it's the one thing you can be absolutely guaranteed is going to happen. So Helen Scott Lidgett was her name. She was diagnosed. They said she only had a few months. She had ovarian cancer. And then she was a very stroppy person, very determined. She had 4 years, and we spent all of that time together. And yeah, I feel very lucky. Obviously, I think one of the reasons people don't talk about it is because it's so hard to imagine. Well, nobody can imagine death. All we know is I'm here today having a chat, and then tomorrow, apparently I'm not going to be here, or whenever it's going to be. And of course, who amongst us can conceive of what not being there will mean? You can't, because all you know is being here. And, we had a long time together, given how short a time she was actually given initially. And we made sure we had lots of laughs and went on holidays. And sometimes she got quite cross about it being over. And then sometimes she was sort of, Helen, this is resolved. But, she was only 63, so she was too young, and she was very vital and vibrant. And we had Marie Curie around a lot in her final days, and they were unbelievably brilliant, as they were with my mother, who didn't take very long to die, but was also 83, so had a better crack at it. But yes, I wouldn't say, I was about to say, I wouldn't say I was comfortable with death. I don't want to die sort of anytime soon, and I have things I want to do, but I accept that I may not be in control of when I go. I sort of, because of the statistical odds, I sort of prepare myself for the inevitability of getting cancer, whether or not it turns out to be terminal. My dad died of pneumonia, and he had prostate cancer, but he'd had it for 13 years. And they said, and he was 81, they said, you'll die with it, not of it. Dad actually was an odd one because Dad, Scottish, not only wouldn't accept he was dying, I found out from his wife, but part of not accepting it is we weren't allowed to know he was ill, which was very weird because he looked so ill. I don't know why I'm laughing. What I'm saying is for me, not just Scots, that's for me quite sort of heterosexual male thing of if I don't tell anyone, then it's not true kind of thing. And I kept saying to my stepmother, Dad looks really unwell. And she, poor old thing, he'd isolated her in that way because she wasn't able to get the love and support of her stepchildren and children because Dad was sort of not accepting it was happening. So even though I started going around to his house every day, which I hadn't done before, you'd think that Dad would know that I knew because what was I doing there every day? And normally I'd go around once every 3 weeks or every month. And that was, I suppose, that was something I learned as well through his dying. I thought, well, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to not let people say their piece. You know, if I'm lucky enough to know I'm dying, I'm going to let everyone come round and say what they want to say and have a cry or whatever happens. Or can I have your nice bracelets? Can I have those good pictures? Is it all right if I have would you mind if I had? When my mother died, she'd had this bloke who was I think he was a bit of a chancer. He sort of pretended to be one of those kind of spiritual types who came round for chats with her because, as she said it, she was lonely. I think in my mother's case, it was just that, you know, she liked the company. He was younger than her. There was no romance, but he literally came, Mum's body wasn't even cold. She died at home, but he came round and literally went, that's my bowl, this rather beautiful Middle Eastern bowl that was on her shelf. And I knew exactly what he meant, but just to make him squirm, I said, oh, what's it doing on Mum's shelf then? I thought, if you're going to do this with the body literally on the other side of the room, then I'm going to make you squirm. And he went, no, she'd promised I could have it when she went. And I went, well, you better get a step ladder and get it down then. And I thought, yeah, if you're going to be the kind of grubby person who comes round when the body's not even cold, then I'm going to make you get up a step ladder and get it down. I dare say we'd never have known because, of course, she hadn't written it down that it was his bowl. It was to go to him. But he was round there pretty sharpish. Anyway. So, yes, I've had quite a lot of experience of death, more than I'd like to, but I guess that's getting older, isn't it? You experience more deaths.
I think some of those conversations you've described and the different types of conversations, you know, for people listening, because of course, as you've said, some people just do not want to go there. They don't want to talk about it. Some people might be more open and might talk about it. And even then, they're still not easy conversations to have. You know, often people will say, how do we start the conversation? How do we broach it? It sounds like Helen was open about her experiences of death and dying, and that she talked about it as it was happening over those 4 years. What kinds of conversations were you and Helen having over that time about death and dying specifically?
Well, to be absolutely fair, Helen wasn't really. I was looking at her passport. We'd gone to Italy for the weekend, Florence, and I was looking at her passport in the airport. And I said, oh, this goes till whenever. And she went, and I won't be there anymore. And she was quite cross about that. So we didn't have we certainly didn't have a Hollywood version of kind of, I've had a wonderful life and thank you so much for being my best friend. So she wasn't particularly comfortable. She was mainly angry. She'd say things like, because her parents had lived until their late 80s. And she said, oh, you know, I don't know why this is happening to me. My parents lived till their 80s. And I said, yeah, well, who knows why any of this is happening. But she was a great joker. And so people, if we were anywhere, people would say, oh, how are you? And she'd go, dying. That was her sort of jokey thing. And then that was interesting because people go, and she'd go, yeah, I've got terminal cancer. And they'd go, oh, right, I'm so sorry. She went, well, I'm not interested in that. And yeah, so she was robust, shall we say. She was pissed off that it was happening and not resolved all the time. She was a great one for wanting answers. So I remember going to see the oncologist for the last time with her what turned out to be the last time. And it was absolutely clear from everything he was saying that he was saying, we've exhausted. But he didn't, because he was sort of posh and handsome. I don't know whether this has got anything to do with him being handsome, but he was quite sort of charming. That was obviously one of his things. So she said, are you telling me it's all over? And he went, I'm saying get your house in order. And she was going, no, I want you to tell me if it's all over. And he was sort of skirting around it. And then he kept saying, just get your affairs in order. And then when we left, he was saying it's over. And I said, yes, I agree. He didn't kind of put it very well, but he was obviously saying it was over. And yeah, she was funny about it, but she was also quite angry. I mean, angry is a bit of a strong word. She was pissed off. And she had every right to be pissed off. And sometimes there was a time, it makes me sound like I'm a saint, but there was a time she lost control of her bowels and vomited. And I had to clear it up. I mean, we weren't in a hospital or anything. I mean, what was I going to do? There was no sort of staff to go, could you clear this up? And I remember, getting a dustpan and a brush and a mop and all that. I think I'd managed to find one rubber glove, but not two. And Helen said, I wouldn't do this for you. And I said, no, I know you wouldn't, because she was much more squeamish than me. And I just said, no, I know you wouldn't. And then I said, well, you won't be around when this is happening to me, you won't be here. And she went, yeah, it's just as well. So we used to have sort of things like that. And, conversations about things and, go shopping. And she lost her hair, and she was, not fair to say she was vain, but because she wasn't vain, but she was very, very stylish and rather beautiful. And anyway, so she spent a fortune on a real hair wig. And we used to laugh about that all the time, because I said, nobody your age would have hair like that anyway, even if they didn't have cancer. And it was a great sort of Cher thing, Cher the pop singer. And I was just going, yeah, you look ridiculous. And she said, well, I'm not going to be one of those women going around with a scarf. But she minded about the loss of hair and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, we had I felt very privileged to have those 4 years with her, and very privileged to have the kind of job where I could, turn things down and be with her. And yeah, but I still miss her. And I wish she hadn't gone, but, she didn't suffer too much. I mean, it was a bit ghastly in the end, but there wasn't too much pain. And, Mary Curie were brilliant, and the doctors, with the pain relief and all that. But yeah, it's, what did I describe it? I'm sure I'm not the first person in the world. It's like you've lived all your life with a lovely, rich carpet, and you walk about on this carpet without realizing how luxuriously deep the pile is, and how in every way it sort of comforts you and keeps you warm and everything. And then threads keep being pulled out the carpet, and you've still got the carpet, but it's a bit more worn and it's not as comfortable to walk on, and there are bits missing. And that's what it's like when you lose the people you love. You still got the carpet, and you still, you're still making the best fist of it that you can. And of course, I've got my children and wonderful, wonderful friends. But losing Helen, I would say, yeah, it's probably the worst thing that's ever happened, because she was too young. And I was okay about my parents dying, even though my dad wasn't really okay about it, because they were in their 80s and had had a very good time of it. I don't mean they'd had perfect lives, but, they'd had children and grandchildren and successful careers. And I mean, they were separated, divorced long before either of them died, but they'd become friends again. Most of the boxes were ticked. They'd made successes of their lives professionally, and more importantly with, friends and family. And as we're all going to die, what you don't want to do, as was the case with Helen, is be going, oh God, this is too soon. And I'm not sure Helen ever made her peace internally with going, but she wasn't sort of railing against, is it Dylan Thomas, railing against the tide, or whatever the expression is, of going, I'm not going. But what I have learned is, I really, really hope I I know when I'm going to die, i.e., what I mean is that I don't die suddenly without letting all the people I love know how much they've meant to me and how great they've made my life.
Marie Curie's mission is to close the gap in end-of-life care. We're here for anyone with an illness they're likely to die from, and those close to them. Whatever the illness, wherever you are, we're with you to the end. Find out more at mariecurie.org.uk.
I think the carpet description, which I'd not heard before, is a great one. And just on your experience of grief after Helen died, what was it like and what helped you, if anything?
So definitely helped knowing she was dying, because I've had another loss quite recently that was a phone call. A very close friend ended his own life. And that's a whole different kind of grief, because he wasn't ill, he decided to take his own life. So knowing that Helen was going to go at least meant you didn't have the shock element. I mean, I'm guessing that the people who don't want to talk about death don't want to because of the inevitable loss and grief and pain you're going to feel. And, who wants to talk about that? But I have found that it helps to talk about it. Not that much. I mean, with Helen, we didn't talk about what life was going to be like without her, because apart from anything else, how could she have known? Neither of us knew. But I did used to say, I'm really going to miss you. And what helped? The love and support of my friends and her children, sharing the grief, that helped a lot. It's the long-term relentlessness of grief that is the thing that's hard to bear, not the kind of immediate aftermath. Because for her funeral, we completely decorated the house. She loved India and had been to India a lot. So we decorated her house where we had the, reception or whatever you call it after the funeral, like an Indian wedding. So it was all silk marigolds, bright orange marigolds everywhere, and Indian decorations. And so that I did with her children and her 3 other closest girlfriends. And the doing stuff after someone dies is very helpful. And I keep thinking that's why they make you do all this, go and get the death certificate, go and get this, do that, ring the undertakers, because the busyness of it all and literally preparing them for and their send-off is a huge part of saying goodbye and it being over. But then when all that is over and it's just the missing them to get on with, what helped? Yeah, the love and support of my other friends. She'd been very close to my children. They were very loving and supportive. And I guess just the laughs that she and I had shared over, God, what would it have been? Nearly 40 years of friendship. The laughs, the memories. I mean, my God, memories are incredibly helpful. And photos and videos of her and shared memories with the other girlfriends she'd had. There was a sort of gang of us, 5 of us. And time, I mean, so cliched. But of course, it goes from feeling you can't bear it, the grief, to getting used to it. And then, as I say, getting used to walking on this carpet that's missing some threads.
But the carpet's still with you and it's still there and it always will be.
Yeah, and the memories, and yeah, and everything she brought to my life and everything I suppose I brought to hers. And I'm still close to her children, which makes a big difference. She was a bit older than me, so her children are older than my children. And it's all those things. It's the legacy, isn't it? And in my view, if you can, you have a duty to maintain the friendships that you had with that person, in this case, her children. And I always quote the Mark Twain, everybody knows this one, don't complain about getting older. It's a privilege denied to many. So I always think, I'm lucky. I'm older now than Helen was when she died. And I always think that's very lucky. And yes, I value life. I had two grannies, obviously, like most people. And one of them, I don't mind saying, because she's long dead, was pretty horrible. Not a nice woman. But the other one was absolutely, I adored her. And she was the only elder. This is for another podcast, but she was one of two elders, i.e., older people when I was a child, who showed me unconditional love, because my parents were Scottish, and I'm not saying all Scots do that, but I doubt they'd ever even heard of unconditional love. But my granny did, and she dropped dead of a heart attack without any warning, and she was 79, and I was in my early 20s. And, that was much harder to get over because there was no goodbye or anything. Granny, we just got a phone call from her cleaning lady saying she'd found her in the kitchen. So great for Granny, not so great for the rest of us. And I still miss Helen to this day. Of course I do. And, talking about her now makes me miss her more. But I mean, saying you've got a duty to get on with it isn't quite right, because it's not duty. I mean, who's my duty to? But you've got to maximize your life when you've lost people who weren't able. That's why I quoted the Mark Twain thing, because other people haven't been able to do that. And they'd love to be here and having a nice time. And every year I have a birthday party, not a very big one. And every year I think, oh, can I be bothered this year? And I always remember what Helen said. She said, you have the parties for the people who can't. And so every year I'm thinking, oh, because my birthday's in the winter, so it's always a bit more of a faff. I can't have it's not like you can have the doors open and everyone's sitting around in the garden. And so I find myself thinking, no, you do it to keep celebrating another milestone, another year, all the friends you've got who are alive. And yeah, so I feel lucky to be alive. I feel lucky to have known love, like the love I had with Helen. And yeah, I feel privileged to be around.
I think that, that part of the sort of bereavement is creating a life without that person in it as they had been in it, and creating a new life with them in it in a very, very different way. And that can be hard work.
Yes, I mean, if you're lucky enough, as I am, and I've put the work in, to have close, loving friends, then they will help you refashion that life. But you're absolutely, back to the carpet, you're trying to reweave it with fewer strands. And you're going, okay, so, right, there will always be a hole where that person was, but it can still work as a carpet. But yeah, it definitely takes time to refashion, to reshape your life without the person that you loved when they've gone. But it's a different shape, but it's worth doing.
It's a different shape. Exactly. It's a different shape. You've touched on this already. I wanted to ask if you think about your own death.
All the time. I think about my death. Well, to be perfectly honest, I think about my death every time I go to yoga, which is most days, because then sometimes I don't feel like doing it. And I go, no, you're putting in the work now to make sure that you don't have a horrible end, which isn't necessarily true. But I also feel good when I do it. But every time I have a glass of wine, every single time I have a glass of wine, I think, am I putting a nail in my coffin? And then a little debate will go on in my head of like, yes, but am I supposed to live without anything that I like? Now that I've got children, and I was late to motherhood, I desperately wanted to be a mother all my adult life, but didn't meet the right person and blah, blah, blah. And I now think about it quite a lot, because I think I really, really want to get my kids who are in their mid-20s, I want them to be cooked. I want them to be with people they love and have children and in jobs they love before I'm taken off. So I do think about it in terms of that. And, I do think about death a lot more since my friend ended his own life, because mercifully, as somebody pointed out to me, I am not able to think about what was in his head. So I don't mean I can't think about it. What I mean is I can't picture why he thought this was a good option. I'm not able to get to the mindset even remotely. So, and, you know, we were very close friends and he's gone now and I wish he weren't. So, yes, I do find myself thinking, you know, did you stop to think what it was going to be like for the rest of us left behind? Obviously not, because had he stopped to think, he probably wouldn't have done it. So, yeah, I think about death. I mean, I don't think I think about death in a morbid way, but I do know it's coming. And I do what I can to mitigate its arrival. And I hope for the best. And, you know, I don't take phenomenal risks, I don't think.
Have you had any conversations with your children about your death? Have you had any practical conversations, like expressed your funeral wishes and or written them down and or done a will or something like that?
I've got a will because I'm divorced and, you know, well, it would naturally go to them both anyway, but because, you know, I am a practical person. No, when my son hadn't rung me for something like 3 weeks, and I said, look, I'm not going to be around forever, and then you won't be able to ring me. And he went, I'm not having this conversation, Mum. I don't think I'd be inclined to have those conversations with them if I weren't ill. I think what I'd do is say to them, look, this has happened. I've been diagnosed with this. It's not a great outcome. Let's talk about the practicalities. I don't think I'd say to them now, shall we talk about what happens when I die without me being ill? I don't think I would, because I think I might frighten them a bit at this stage. I don't know.
So talking about it can be scary.
Yeah, and I think they'd think I wasn't telling them something. But I talk about it with my mates. And then, I mean, sometimes the kids and I at Christmas, we always have this tradition. We have a little boogie to Boogie Wonderland, the three of us. And then I always say to them, I want this played at my funeral. And my son went, but it's not very funerary. And I said, that's the point. It's a party song. So, you know, make it a party. Or at least don't be playing dirges. Play the stuff I love to listen to and R&B. And that'll make people remember who I was rather than, oh, here we go. Another sort of funerary song.
Well, for anybody listening who is planning on writing a will, you can put some of your basic funeral wishes into your will, including Boogie Wonderland.
Well, they can't really, because it's mine. And obviously I don't want people going, oh, not this again.
Yeah. Is legacy something that's important to you, as in how you'd like to be remembered?
I mean, you know, I don't want there to be the Arabella Weir Foundation of whatever, because I'm not that much of an egomaniac. And anyway, I won't be here because I love life. And one of the things I love about life is being here. I'm not really interested in what happens when I'm not here because I won't be there. But I would like people to remember me as a great friend and a brilliant mother and a funny person, and to hold me in their memories. But I mean, it is literally pointless saying to people, what would you like your legacy to be? Because you won't be around to enjoy it. You know, what would I like someone to eat tonight in an expensive restaurant? I've no idea because I won't be there. But I hope people remember me. Well, I'm sure they will. The people who love me fondly. And I tell you, I would like, but then I definitely reap that in my daily life as someone who made a difference, because I do make efforts to help people. So I'd like to be remembered as someone who made a difference, who put their shoulder to the wheel.
Is there anything you'd like to say for anybody listening who's either caring for somebody who's dying and or grieving?
Well, I would say this, whether you're looking after someone who's dying or dying yourself, or not even either of those, never, ever left anything unsaid. Say everything. You know, as I said, my parents were Scottish, and they absolutely, my granny used to say it all the time, no, that's enough. Least said, soonest mended. And I always remember thinking as a kid, you know, as you can tell, I talk a lot anyway, but I remember thinking, no, I don't understand. Why is the least said the soonest mended? The least said, the less you know, and the less you know what people, so particularly when people are dying, tell them how much you love them. Tell them how, on both sides, how lucky you are to have had them. And, even if you do have a cry, I think that's the thing. People are so frightened of crying. So what? So if you have a cry, big deal. A friend of mine wouldn't go and see his estranged father when he was dying. He'd asked to see him, but, the dad had behaved very, very badly. And he said, no, I don't want to see him. And I said, but he'll be dead soon, and then you won't be able to see him. And he said, if I go, I'll start crying, and then I might never stop. And I remember thinking, oh, that's fear, because of course you'd stop. So if you are caring for someone, as I did with Helen when she was dying, of course we had a cry sometimes, but we also had brilliant laughs. So my main thing is never left anything unsaid, because you won't be able to say it when they've gone.
My last question is, how has it been today being on the Marie Curie couch and having these kinds of conversations around death and dying?
A bit emotional, obviously. And then obviously I think about Helen all the time, and my mum and dad and my stepmother, who I adored. But I'm thinking about them more now because of this conversation. But I also welcome the opportunity to bring Helen back that vividly, talking about her like this. So it's been very, I'm trying to think of the right word, a little bit emotional, a bit shaky, wobbly making, but also lovely.
And I think that's another really lovely reason to have the conversations and sometimes make time for them, even if it's been a long time since someone's died, because as you've just described so well, bringing someone back in and kind of for an hour or for half an hour is, yes, can be sad, but is also lovely.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to bring her back into the room.
Arabella Weir, thank you for joining me today on the Marie Curie couch. Thank you for sharing some of Helen's story and your mum and dad and stepmum, and it's a joy to meet you.
It was a huge pleasure. Thank you very much. It's very, very nice to meet you.
So that's all for this episode of On the Marie Curie Couch. We hope it's got you thinking about matters of life and death, and perhaps starting those conversations with your own friends and family. Marie Curie's here to help, from planning ahead to coping with bereavement. You can talk through any concerns you have around the end of life with our support line team, which also includes specially trained nurses. Call us on 0800 090 2309 or search Marie Curie online. The podcast is produced and edited by Marie Curie with support from Ultimate Content. The music featured is Time Lapse by Pan Oceanic. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like and subscribe. Thanks for listening, and until next time, goodbye.